I just opened up Twitter, and the first tweet I see is the masculine urge to see if you can get the gun off the cop in front of you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Human Reaction, your weekly source for independent commentary on cultural news and politics. We're glad to be back here with you. Big week of news. David, what are we talking about?
Welcome back to Trump Assassination Attempt Part 2. Iran is trying to kill Trump, apparently, is the big news story of the week. Kind of. So we're going to dig into that. There's a whole bunch of sub-stories on that, around that. A lot of it's the fallout from the second Trump assassination, stuff that came out after we covered it, stuff that kind of was revealed this week, including a leaked note from the attempted assassinator.
Strategery.
I totally did a Bush's in there. Okay. You guys are accusing of any of it, and now it's actually happening.
Here we go.
All right. So second, it turns out the government lies to us, guys.
What? I don't believe you.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. An ex-Border Patrol leader comes out and says that he was instructed to lie to the American people in Congress in testimony. Very interesting. New York City Mayor Eric Adams loves turkey and wire fraud.
It's not even Thanksgiving yet.
He's a little early.
Yeah.
He was doing pumpkin spice lattes in July, so he's just a little ahead of the
curve.
And we have two segments with a lot of sub-stories, but the major arc of them is, one, we're going to get a nice update on all the things that happened this week and censorship.
All right.
Yeah.
This week in censorship. Our newest segment.
and World War III.
That's the second segment, World War III. And lastly, in the skiff, we're going to discuss, are we woke and we didn't even know it?
Oh.
Us? Yeah. Us.
There's been some internet accusations rolling around about a new woke movement, and we've been dancing around with it, it seems like.
Oh.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about that in the skiff.
Dancing is woke for sure.
Dancing is kind of woke.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's kind of fruity.
You said it on me.
Hey, nothing wrong with dancing.
I'm kidding. But if you want to make us dance, go to humanreactionpod.com.
Good transition. Nice.
Go to humanreactionpod.com and find out how to support us.
Subscribe to our OnlyFans.
And subscribe to all of our channels. We don't have an OnlyFans yet.
Look, if our Discord gets 100 members, we will film a dance video, a TikTok dance video. All right. So this is a call.
No. Only
Bennett will be at the front.
Well, we got to prove that he is down with the cause for this podcast.
We're going to have to take a class and learn how to floss. That's what it's going to be.
But yeah, join our Discord, and also you can see dank memes like this. Diddy all lubed up and slipping through the bars of his cell. Dun, 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 dun. Also a Terminator reference.
If you are a small business owner looking for exponential growth, you have to connect with Adam Thune at Intellectual Patriots. He will revolutionize your business game and help you get to the next level. Adam can streamline your business practices and advertising strategies to improve your bottom line. His expertise in data engineering means he can build you the systems you need to collect and analyze market data. His mission is to provide you with invaluable insights to fuel your success, from grant writing and business proposals to digital systems integrations, even AI management. Intellectual Patriots is a one-stop shop for cutting-edge solutions. Don't wait another second. Visit intelpatriots.com to learn more. That's INTEL patriots.com. This episode is brought to you by Revved Up Promo, the official apparel partner of Human Reaction. Revved Up is a premier full-service shop specializing in laser engraving, screen printing, and embroidery. Not only are they now making all of our apparel right down the road from us, they can do the same for your brand and ship it to you anywhere in the world. Revved Up helps you navigate the extensive universe of merch options and uses state-of-the-art techniques to showcase your brand in its very best light. So if you want to support our show and our generous sponsor, you can now do so by buying our merch and by turning to Revved Up Promo for your own custom apparel needs. Reach them at revveduppromo.com. That's with 2 V's and 2 P's, or just check the show notes for a link.
Let's get into the Trump assassination, David. What is going on with part 2?
Yeah, part 2. Aftermath. Okay, so much of this week, it was the narrative formation. And this happened right after, too. There was some insinuations of sort from Time Magazine and others that Iran was secretly behind it. In fact, it goes all the way back to the first Trump assassination attempt. There was some kind of playing around with the idea in public and news articles,
bank accounts and stuff like that. There was a bunch of accusations of him being tied to bank accounts.
I know, and I went back around. I tried to research that. There's still no real information.
It was anonymous sources that said so.
Yeah. So we don't really understand what that was. Obviously, reporting a lot of not well sourced stuff. But we have like Time, for example. Trump's security was heightened in recent weeks after intel of Iranian assassination plot. No indication rally shooting was linked. So what I think is interesting here is how the narrative is separate from the shootings, but there is obviously people are trying to still understand the last two, right? So when they talk about the potential out there for these assassination teams, for bounties and stuff like that, that there is a tie to Iran. And I think that's a very interesting, very subtle play happening in the media landscape at the moment. So we have Trump himself came out and had some commentary on this this week, which made a lot of headlines.
But if I were the president, I would inform the threatening country, in this case Iran, that if you do anything to harm this person, we are going to blow your largest cities.
Are we not saying phrasing anymore?
To smithereens. Nice. We're going to blow it to smithereens. You can't do that. And there would be no more threats. There would be no more threats. But right now, we don't have that leadership or the necessary people, the necessary leaders. We have two people, not one. We don't even know who our president is right now. Who is our president right now? We really don't know, but we have two people, not one, that only keep looking. And when you do that, when you just look, trouble always ensues. So it's big trouble for our country.
That's very cryptic. What does he mean by that?
Well, and what we got was NPR reported, quote, American intelligence officials briefed former President Trump on threats from Iran to assassinate him. So, like, what it looks like happened is he met with these people from the intelligence community who said, Iran's trying to kill you, sir. And then he comes out and gives us, basically turns it into a campaign rally speech saying Biden's incompetent. He can't even stop Iran from trying to kill me, right? Is what the underlying insinuation
now,
is.
Would the motivation for Iran to be out to get Trump specifically be because of his strike on Soleimani?
That is the supposed motive.
That's what Iran says too. Iran does a lot of saving face, and they, like, if you remember in the first assassination attempt, there was all the blame that was being put on Iran, and Iran was like, no, we were not part of this one.
That's this time.
But they're like, although we believe Trump is a war criminal for the assassination of Soleimani, we believe that he should be tried in a fair trial. Like they put out like a whole statement about that.
Yeah. Well, just recently I saw Senator Mike Lee put up a video from 2022 that I hadn't seen before.
Do you want to just mute it and we can go through it and kind of explain it for the audio listeners?
Yeah.
The sound is not important. In this case, it shows what's particularly creepy about it is it shows Palm Beach, Florida, Trump golfing, someone who's supposed to look like Trump. It's actually made with Unreal Engine. That's
totally. It looks like Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah,
it does.
Yeah. It's like an old version of Unreal too.
And we've got this like
not that great.
Robot with a camera on it driving past the golf course, looking at the security cameras.
That's not how hacking works.
Someone behind a computer screen accessing the gate.
It's like Cyberpunk 2077.
Which it then just proceeds to drive right underneath, which I thought was funny.
Well, he turned off the camera. That's
it said access granted.
The camera.
Well, apparently this was on the Ayatollah's official website back in 2022.
Like this is internal Iranian propaganda to create confidence in their military capability to strike the United States. Now, would they do this? God, no.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so hard to imagine, right? Because if they do this, that is immediate war with Iran. The one thing they're trying not to do. Now, when this happened, like this week, at the exact same time, and we'll get to this when we get to the foreign policy bit, but Iran's minister of like foreign policy was in New York calling for peace talks.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Between Israel, America, Hezbollah, and Iran.
When this happened, what happened specifically?
This week. Like when all this news media coverage of Iran is really trying to kill the president.
Oh, I see.
So what all state actors want is to put off a picture to their people in their country that they are strong and they're able to defend them. And even a country like Iran that has no nukes, that has a tiny a tiny air force compared to ours, a tiny navy compared to ours, can't really project power that far. Right? It's crazy that they can project power as far as they have, and it's mostly through proxies that they don't really have direct control over. According to, standard CIA, intelligence cutout assessments of this from the Rand Corporation and others. Oh, do you want to start the clock timer here so I don't totally go over on a segment? Thank you, sir. This use of proof is saying like there is the best case for this being proof is that there is a motive, right? That's Soleimani right there, right? It's like in memoriam. This is like how we're going to get him back, right? For that.
Well, and that's the important thing to look when we're talking about foreign policy. Often there's the inward facing propaganda and then there's the outward facing propaganda and then the general diplomacy between nation states, right? Where even we have that, where our political leaders are going to be doing all these drumming up the bases for their given political party and they're going to be making all these statements. But in reality, the diplomacy between the nations actually looks very different. And what is more important is what the actual diplomacy between the nations looks like rather than what the politicians are saying to the proletariat, right?
Yeah.
We can get distracted by this sort of thing and think that Iran really has this aim when they really don't. This is something that is really just for their internals. And they would understand this as well, right? When they look out the saber rattling of the West against Iran, right? Because obviously you got all kinds of people who have been advocating for war against Iran forever.
Yep.
Internal to the United States to get votes. And then when they get in office, they have a more measured approach that's much more reasonable. Although there's a lot of people who want a position for that.
Yeah.
That mission.
I'm just curious. What significance does do the headlines that came out about Iran hacking the Trump campaign and giving that intel to the Kamala campaign have to do with this, if anything? Because that came out. I think it was last week or the week prior.
Yeah,
they got hacked by Iran, and then all of that information was given to Kamala. This was just pre-presidential debate that it came across my radar.
Yeah, what was that? I'm now blanking on that as well. I remember seeing that. What came of that? I'm not actually sure.
Not
what
really
came
that
of it.
much, which is kind of my question. Is that just another drop in the bucket of Iran's the bad guy, and this is just kind of fodder for Republicans to say we need to be hawkish on Iran right now?
Well, it's also and from Iran's point of view, I assume it has a lot to do with you are constantly screwing with our internal politics. We can do this to you as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. So the different color revolutions that happened all across the Europe to the Arab Spring that we now know was highly connected with the censorship industrial complex and an encouragement to overthrow countries using social media to very specific. There's good cases to be made that different youth uprisings in Iran have been encouraged by the State Department and by covert operations for a long time. So those sorts of things as a tit for tat that the intelligence apparatuses of both these countries are going against each other and kind of fighting a battle over.
Yeah, and I want to be clear too, I'm not even necessarily saying that Iran wouldn't be doing this. They wouldn't be putting an assassination team. It's just there's a certain thing where we got to recognize where our belief right now, and this is according to Matt Gaetz, is that there's 5 active assassination teams right now going after Trump that we're aware of.
And are those internal to the U.S. or is one of those suspected to be foreign,
so
Iranian?
It's supposed to be 3 foreign and 2 domestic.
Okay.
And the foreign, and this is the Matt Gaetz quote right here, is 3 of these teams are foreign inspired from my understanding: Iranians, Ukrainians, and Pakistani. And the work is obviously challenging to protect protective detail like a presidential campaign that is vigorous and out campaigning. He even goes on to, this is kind of an interesting quote, and we've seen a few times where resources have been pulled off the Trump detail for the Jill Biden detail or the John Bolton detail, and we're going to question whether or not that was sound given what we know about the efforts to kill Trump.
Wow. Got to protect John Bolton. That mustache is it's a national treasure.
But it's you gotta, they don't grow them like that in Iran, do they?
I don't know. Actually, they have pretty good mustaches over there too.
But that's one of those things it seems like what we're aware, or at least what congressmen are being briefed on right here, is that there's 5 assassination teams allegedly that are going on, and the one that we're focusing right now is Iran. We're always hyper focusing on Iran over everything else, which is an interesting dynamic.
Well, and they got all the right people on the war drums right now about this. Like Mark Levin put out the most screeching tweet about this, and it is like it feels like it's 2003 all over again.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see here. Come on. Iran is at war with us. They're actively trying to assassinate President Trump. All caps.
That's not a very good Mark Levin voice.
Oh, I know. I'm just trying to put the shrillness into it. And like this is obviously unhelpful.
Yeah.
Right? And the question is why do we always return to this? Like Ryan Ruth himself encouraged Iran to do it in his book. In his book, he says like Iran should do this, because he voted for. It was like a resentment thing towards Trump because Trump pulled out of the nuclear deal.
Yeah,
right? And failed to do, and is failed as a president. He's hoping that Iran will get back from the Soleimani attack using that. So like he himself was aware of this narrative and took advantage of it in his book.
Yeah.
And I'd be curious who these two domestic teams are supposed to be. I didn't see any like
CIA and FBI.
Bennett, do you have any intelligence on that you want to give us?
Okay.
Oh, well, and that's the thing too, is a lot of these, they might not even be officially state actors. Like there could be a lot of different, like there could be things that are Iranian ties, but not necessarily the Iran state, or Ukrainian ties, not necessarily the Ukrainian state. Like this is all a mixed bag. A lot of these things, when we're talking about intelligence operations, which assassinations in general are intelligence operations, right? It could be anything. Right now, there's so little that we as the public actually know, and it just seems, I'm skeptical of us having to be like, this is the narrative. We're supposed to follow this narrative. Don't question that narrative. Don't look at these other things, these other variables. Just go right on path with this very simple narrative that is coming out from very poor sourcing and intelligence agents who tend to lie to us about war stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That's where I'm kind of a little leery about what's going on right now.
Well, it's also the selection bias here. Mark Levin isn't talking about how Ukraine is trying to assassinate Trump. Like that's a much bigger story. Why? We've been functionally in a Cold War or in proxy war with Iran since the 1960s.
Mm-hmm. By way of Israel.
Yeah, but we've given Ukraine billions of dollars. And now Ukraine, like someone connected to potentially the Ukraine government or connected to via the mob or connected to via nationality from Ukraine, probably motivated by his less hawkish stance on Ukraine, is trying to assassinate the president. That's a way more interesting story, Mark Levin.
True.
Why aren't we talking about that?
True.
He didn't put out a shrillest tweet on that topic, much less other people. He's not alone. A lot of the standard operators here are making exactly the same noise selectively on Iran.
Well, and it's all the people that are the hardcore Zionists that are the ones pushing on the Iran detail, and all the ones that aren't the hardcore Zionists are like, well, wait a second, and there's just kind of like a little degree of skepticism. Should we be believing the people that lie to us all the time about war stuff,
right?
Or should we just accept them at face value on this one, right? That's kind of where.
Well, and I mean, assuming that because we've had 2 and maybe potentially 3 assassination attempts with the chemical or I think what I've been reading is suspected to potentially be some sort of UV laser that was used in Tucson at the Trump rally that made all those people kind of have burning eyes and stuff like that. If we've had 2, maybe 3 assassination attempts, it seems reasonable that there may be additional ones, particularly if we have this detail that there are 5 teams going after him. So putting Iran in the crosshairs of, we know that they're after him, makes it very easy to blame them if there is another attempt and maybe it's successful, right? Then that's like, every conservative that was previously even the slightest bit non-interventionist or thinking about America first is now, they got our guy, we got to go get him.
Right. And that's
9/11 all over again.
Yeah. Programming. Yes, David.
That would be a good example of it.
Yes,
right? Because
David.
you're trying to queue up a very specific result before the action happens. And that doesn't say you control the action. It just says you're trying to control the narrative that might result after the fact.
That's what I'm always saying about pre-programming.
I think your definition is a little looser there. But there's a really great tweet. And I think like even stepping back one layer further, there's a really great tweet from Dissident Media. From a Democracy Now! Interview with somebody. When you bring it up, I could actually say who it is.
Is this the "Why is it always Iran" one?
Yeah.
Okay.
That kind of gets into why is the State Department constantly on this, right? Obviously, this is General Wesley Clark, talking about an interaction that he had as a staffer in the Bush White House right after 9/11 and the various conditions at that time. And you will note that since the 1980s, we've been accusing Iran of having a nuclear weapon, and there's been the steady, like, Iran is our enemy thing. You got Bibi Netanyahu right after 9/11 coming to Congress saying, if I could overthrow one other country other than Iraq, it would be Iran. There's this constant, it's Iran narrative that's being formulated by a certain group of people who are interested in shifting U.S. foreign policy that direction. And this is an interesting kind of anecdote from that time.
Right after 9/11, about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
And
I said, "Is it classified?" He said,
PNAC
"Yeah."
document?
Project for a New American Century.
Yeah.
It sounds like it could be.
Well,
Because that was their plan, right?
Well, okay, so that is a think tank.
Yeah.
The memo summary.
It feels like it comes out of that ideological progression.
Yes,
though.
right.
This is a few years later.
This is
from
the
that.
influence
Yeah.
of the neocons. That was in the 1990s, right? Saying how we're going to secure the future of the Middle East for Israel.
So this is
and the United
basically
States.
that actually being translated into real military action.
Policy.
Yeah.
And that's what's so funny here is how there's no like clear reason why in the memo he's talking about. Right?
They
It's
nailed
like,
the
I don't know,
timeline,
Chris.
though.
Oh yeah, yeah. They knocked them all down, almost in that order.
It was
right?
all supposed to be by 2020. So there's
Yeah, they crushed
Syria and Iran have not been, there yet. Right.
Yeah.
There's been a few red lines drawn, and they never quite got it. Assad gassed his own people a few times, and yeah. Right.
Well, what did he say? 7 countries in 5 years, and we were in Iraq and Afghanistan for 20.
Yeah.
Plus or minus.
Because I think it was supposed to be, if I remember right, the general plan was something like it was by 2020 the project would be concluded, and it's so far it's like the only ones we haven't won that battle on, or we haven't finished the job in a sense. Have we really finished the job? It's hard to say. Is the Middle East better? Hard to say. Not really that hard to say.
Definitely not.
But
no, it's very clear.
Syria and Iran in particular are the ones where we haven't overthrown the folks. Right?
Yeah.
Well, so just to refresh for listeners who might not remember us talking about like kind of this overarching plan to basically overthrow all these Middle Eastern countries, why is that the objective?
Well, the theory from their point of view, of the writers of that strategic memo or whatever, was if you overthrow these countries, you install democracy in these areas, then they won't go to war with Israel.
Right. So
That was
okay.
the aim.
So it's basically to stabilize the threats to Israel in the Middle East.
Right.
Democracies don't attack democracies. That's the ideology.
Right.
Yeah, we never do that.
Yeah. No, of course.
Which is why we need to forcibly put democracies in these places. That's kind of the
And really, what they
general-
mean by democracy is a government that's friendly to the West that they can control.
Yeah, and then it also empowers when it's harder to do covert operations using the tools that we developed since the Reagan era. against hard targets, like hardened targets, like autocracies and oligarchies. Democracies are much easier because you have all these people you can influence and organize using your money, right? So, and then the model goes all the way back to the very first covert operation of the CIA, which was keeping Italy from being able to be controlled by the communists, right? The first operation was moving money into a country to make sure that the right people get elected. And now it has the patina, it has the look from the outside, if you don't know about the covert operation, as the organic choosing of a friendly Western government. But this is the operation we run everywhere. Ukraine, that we've been running in Iraq, that we've been running anywhere in the world, that we really care about the politics in that country. Democracy is a way easier way to do it because you can do it with the guise of legitimacy. When it's a harder target, Mubarak, for example, he might come with you on some stuff, but he's not in your pocket.
Egypt, right?
Yeah, in Egypt. Yeah. He might be in your pocket on some things. He might be relying on your military. He might be relying for all kinds of things, but he isn't as easy to manipulate as a mass crowd. And then additionally to that, it's easy to sell the American public, right? Because since World War I, we've been saying we're going to make the world safe for democracy, right? So that it fits the American narrative and can more easily manipulate the American public into being an aggressive force in the world, something that Americans don't innately want to do.
Yeah.
But we're not the British Empire, right? We're not like, oh, we got the white man's burden. We got to go do this stuff. You say that in America, you sound like an alien. You sound like a weirdo. But if you say we're going to give rights to women in Afghanistan or in Syria or whatever, then people are like, oh yeah, okay, I can see that.
Yeah. And you propagandize the population with your general intelligence apparatus, however that looks like, mass media manipulation, CIA propaganda, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You propagandize factions of the civilization or of the society to be more so towards your cause or towards some sort of ideology that, allows you to kind of say to our people, hey, the people even want us there, right? You
right.
have that. It's like they want it. They love us. They want more freedom, and you kind of.
They're celebrating us in the streets.
Yes.
Yeah.
When it's probably like a protest of like 12 people. And,
With the cameraman just right in the right place.
Positioned correctly.
Well, right? Or a lot of people, but we
do that a lot in South America.
Brought in a lot of money to make it happen, right? And that's
Ukraine was that way in 2014 in the revolution. That's what Ukraine was like, because we had massive manipulation that was going on and trying to instill and fan the flames of things.
Because Yanukovych, the guy who came into power, was not as friendly to the EU as we wanted. And that was probably had to do with, and Mike Bittens is, of course, the gold standard on this, that was probably due to the desire to control Burisma and the natural gas coming out of Ukraine. So that we could then manipulate those markets. We could get Exxon. It was funny. Trump actually this week had a small segment where he's talking about that. He said, oh yeah, they want to talk to Zelensky, something about a gas deal.
Just a deal
for
deal.
No, oil. He said something about a deal about oil, which I think he actually meant natural gas. But that was the operation, and that's been the operation to control natural gas, so that you can then use liquid natural gas from America, sell that to Europe, rather than much cheaper pipeline gas out of Eastern Europe.
Well, and this is why Trump got impeached, because there was a weapons deal that was going through, and Trump tried to hold out on the weapons deal. And the condition was, you're only going to get these, Zelensky, if you investigate into American corruption that's going on in Ukraine. And it had to do with Burisma and Hunter Biden and all that stuff. And it was like, oh, quid pro quo, presidents shouldn't do that. Oh no, blah, blah, blah. And like, that was the whole thing that we get fed in the narrative, but it had to do with all this Hunter Biden corruption stuff.
Yeah.
That's what he was holding it out on.
Yeah.
Right?
Because that never happens in government, where they withhold something
that never
unless you
happens.
give them something.
Well,
That never happens.
And Trump himself denies that that's what he was trying to do. He just said, I just hope that you tell our he says on the Sean Ryan show this week in that interview that I just think if you had any corruption problems, please come to our State Department and let us know. Yeah. That's what he says. Right?
The way Trump phrases it, he's like, we had a beautiful phone call.
right. You don't know
the best phone call.
It was the best phone call.
Think of it.
There hasn't been phone calls like it before.
So what also happened this week is the manifesto of the second Trump shooter was leaked to the press. Interesting. And I couldn't find like an actual transcript of it. And it isn't very legible, like the pictures you can find of it. That said, the U.S., the House of Representatives has launched an investigation into the Department of Justice for the leak, right? Because this is not the sort of thing that they should be leaking.
What would their motivation be to allow that to happen?
I'm not exactly sure. It isn't clear to me yet. I mean, it might have something to do with how to formulate your grand jury for the prosecution of Ryan Routh. But it isn't clear to me yet. I don't really have a solid theory about why the DOJ leaked it. It could have been it could have been a pedestrian reason too. It could have been just like someone got offered some money to leak it and they took the money.
Interesting. There's an interesting dynamic there around things getting leaked from the DOJ and other big entities, because that was one of or what gets redacted and what doesn't get redacted. That's also another element, because one of the things that Jack Posobiec was saying on his live with Tucker a few days ago was that, I think it might have been part of these documents, or might have been different documents, where they redact everything, but they chose not to redact the $150,000 bounties that are on Trump. So they chose to leave that out there. And he's suggesting that's a nature of, you redact everything. You could redact that one, right?
Yeah.
But you don't, and it's just like, $150,000 bounty? Interesting, and it starts to inspire more people, right?
Well, and so was this bounty offered by Ryan Routh?
This is like in his thing. I will offer, if I fail, I will offer $150,000.
Was that part of the Ryan Routh thing?
Yes,
it was that one?
Okay, so
it's part of the manifesto.
So big question on this. This guy was not wealthy, owned a very small roofing business, was traveling the world,
scouting out Taliban for Ukraine,
and recruiting from the Middle East for the war in Ukraine, and now is offering $150,000. Where's this guy getting $150,000 to offer?
It could be that he has a patron, or it could be that he's lying.
He's just lying. Yeah, he's just trying to get somebody to do it.
Yeah, he's talking out his ass.
Fair.
The patronage seems like a.
I mean, okay, there's
it is suspicious.
It is suspicious. There's a lot of suspicions there.
There's actual evidence that he's traveling all over the world. He ends up in Florida. He's in the Middle East. He's in Ukraine. How's he traveling? Yeah. Not running his roofing business. He's got to be being paid by somebody.
Yeah.
Where's he getting this money? He's just racking up credit cards?
Ukrainian mob, maybe. Very possible.
Could be mob, yeah.
Organized crime in Ukraine.
I mean, but so often dollars to Ukraine. I'm sure he got some.
But this is also the thing. So often, mob ties and intelligence ties are one and the same. Often, mafias are the assets used for intelligence gathering, because it's like, okay, you have a steady control over this city. Hey, we'll work out a deal. We won't put you in and we'll be part of you'll be part of our intelligence gathering apparatus, and we'll work together. That's a very common tactic that's used.
In fact, it's the core of it. The CIA, in that example I said about the Italian election, their very first operation, Alan Dulles is quoted as saying, if it weren't for the Italian mob, the Italy would be part of the Soviet bloc right now.
Yeah, Italian mob and Catholic Church, which were basically one and the same.
Yeah, they did use church assets for this, and they used it all across Poland. They used it all across the Iron Curtain. So it's not a novel theory to think about it that way. It's actually, if you don't understand that about covert operations, you don't understand covert operations fundamentally. Is what it appears to be.
Yeah. So people need to accept that state intelligence and
organized
mafia
crime
organizations collaborate all the time.
Yes.
Yep.
Or just flat out one and the same.
There's a massive Venn diagram.
Has Kamala seen this one? Because I feel like she
knows all about Venn diagrams.
She might like this
one. There was an Associated Press summary of the first Trump shooter that came out that basically tells us nothing. And once again, it's really frustrating. Quote, agents have cracked into his phone, searched his laptop, interviewed hundreds of people, yet the FBI says his motive remains unknown. And it summarizes a Senate and Secret Service reports on the aftermath of what happened, how was this roof not covered, etc. And basically it's the Secret Service screwed up, and nobody in particular is to blame so far as what it appears to be.
Wow.
We've investigated ourselves and we found no wrongdoing.
Boy, that's never happened before.
No, it's more like we investigate ourselves and whoops, sorry guys, mistakes happen. I mean, come on. Don't you guys make mistakes?
We're only human.
We're only human.
Jeez. Yeah, that's that.
Wow.
That's funny. So yeah, let's move on to this story about the ex-border chief. He made a testimony to Congress talking about how he was told not to enforce the border and to lie about it. essentially. I don't think I might skip over his actual testimony and just get into his interview with Sean Hannity here, where he can be a little bit more,
It is telling though, and a great haircut.
Great haircut.
For those of you just listening, he is incredibly bald.
Fellow bald. He's a truth seeker.
Yeah, I know. He knows what's going on.
Here, wait. Actually, let me get closed captioning.
He's not burdened by hair. He's unburdened.
He's unburdened by what has been. He once had hair, and he has been unburdened by what has been.
What can bald?
We're just roasting this guy's hairline. What's going on? I'm sorry, dude.
So you were told to keep these illegal immigrants out of sight. At the same time, Harris, Biden, Mayorkas, and every other administration official, they were telling the American people that the border is secure and the border is closed. So they basically were telling you to lie to the American people and cover it up on their behalf. Is that an accurate description?
I think it's pretty accurate. They wouldn't allow us to put out any information. It was very frustrating knowing what was going on, knowing that there were large gaps in the border coverage, and that there were real threats there that we weren't able to address, and that there were real threats entering our country.
And who was telling you to do that?
It came through my headquarters, Border Patrol headquarters.
Okay, and they also prevented you from reporting the names and the actual number of illegal immigrants that had ties to terror? And if that's the case, because we know there are hundreds of people with terror ties in this country, we know that there are people, 11.5 million is now the number of people we know about. And then there are the gotaways, but people coming from 180 countries, that would include our top geopolitical foes and countries with terror ties. That would be Iran and Syria and Egypt and Afghanistan, and that would include Venezuela. That would include tens and tens of thousands from Russia and China. Am I correct about that?
You are correct. We are not allowed to put any information out on any of the individuals, whether it be the significant increase in number of the significant interest aliens that entered, or any information out that we had large gaps, entire zones across Texas, Arizona, and California that had no agent presence for weeks at a time. We have no idea what and who entered our country over that time frame, and we weren't allowed to put that information.
Wild. They weren't allowed to put that information out.
Well, yeah, and this is one of those things because this is one of the things that I think changed my mind on a lot of immigration stuff over time was I became increasingly aware that you just can't trust the government numbers on things, which should not be shocking to a libertarian per se, maybe.
Definitely not.
But this is just one of those. This is such a scandal right here where we're just saying like, no. We actually just cannot report on the numbers of everything that's happening right now. So like the American public's just not getting the accurate information. And then the news comes in and they're reporting on like the official numbers, but they're not getting the real numbers, right?
And they're saying this isn't a problem. Right? We're not being told it's a problem. We're talking to the officials on the ground, the Border Patrol agents, and they're saying there's no problem. Wild. Absolutely.
Completely.
You're full of shit today.
Amen. So, I mean, are there going to be ramifications from this?
No.
Or do you think this is just going to, is this going to die by Monday? Because that's what it feels like.
So they could bring accusations against the Biden administration, but what are they going to do? Impeach them? Right? I mean, with the executive privileges problems that we have, classification problems that we have, all those sorts of things, it's going to be a very drawn out process to do something like that. And the election will be over by then.
Yeah. Well, one thing that it could do, I suppose, is make a pretty effective campaign ad for Trump saying tying Kamala as borders are to this. Because you would think if she was like in charge of it, she would know what's being handed down in terms of orders not to report on stuff.
Right. They could, but all of those congressional representatives who'd have to actually investigate and interview people and do the paperwork and file all the things, they're all out in their districts campaigning right now.
Right. So they're not actually in Washington doing any work.
Right.
Classic.
Well, they have to run for the election. I mean, that's just how Democratic Republic has
I'm
to
just
work
saying.
too, right?
I'm just saying. They're not at work right now.
I'm just saying there's a lot of campaigning going on, not a lot of working.
It is September, guys.
What is this, France? What is a 4-day work week? Come on.
That is the crazy thing about the system, is that we have like all this stuff like, oh no, they're supposed to go and they're supposed to create laws and do all the legislation process. And it's just, especially for Congress people, like it's less so for senators, but for Congress people, it's like, yeah, but you're campaigning for like 75% of the time you're in there in your term. It's crazy.
Just constantly raising money.
Well, and that's
spending our money.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like the January after you're elected, you're out making phone calls saying, hey, I got to build up my war chest for my reelect. The reason why is because there's all kinds of campaign finance rules on donation amounts that then like constrain your time frame. So you have to get, 10,000 people to give you $2,000, right? And that campaign amount just creates a natural barrier where and then you're limited by time. How many people can you talk to in a month, in a week, in a year, in 2 years, so that you can actually be competitive against, the machine?
This is a total tangent, but I'm just going to follow it because I'm curious. What is your opinion as a libertarian, but someone who's been deeply involved in political, like electoral politics and campaigns, about money in politics? Because it seems like this whole thing, like what we just talked about, is distracting our elected officials from actually doing their work because they have to raise so much money to be competitive in the next election.
Yeah, it's a heck of a catch-22 that I'm not exactly sure what you can get out of, right? If you look at it from all angles and not a dogmatic angle, it becomes very difficult to say that there's a clear answer. One of the trick is that you as an individual have the challenge, if you want to challenge an incumbent, of needing to raise money. So you get to raise money. Does the incumbent not to get to raise money? Right?
Well, I mean, yeah. Do you limit the ability to raise money?
And if you say no one can, then who's in power? The media. Because they get to say what you believe. You don't get to have your own voice. Yeah. You don't get to buy the advertising that allow you to say, no, the media's lying about me. This is what I actually think. Mm-hmm. So who's in power when you take away money out of politics? The people who influence the media. Who's the number one most important influence on the media?
Pfizer.
I mean, you have corporate interests, and then you have intelligence interests. To me, that's the real danger. The only way to challenge that system is if you have enough marshaled private interest to try to take on and limit that system. Otherwise, we'd have a much, much larger government. I mean, I fail to see, from the right-wing perspective, if you can't give corporate America any voice in politics, then you're in big trouble when it comes to the foundational, should the government control and run everything question. Even though they're a completely imperfect vessel, right? They want to capture agencies and they want to take advantage of them for their bottom line. Totally. And that's the problem with that is that the government has the power in the first place, right? To me. So to me, it's often a distraction to take away from the fundamental question is, should the government be highly involved in our economy? Should be highly involved in our lives? And if the government was smaller, it wouldn't matter how much money you spent, because you'd be debating more foundational, important questions like, should we be going to war with Iran? Not, running ads on, or not lobbying all this time and money and effort on, medical or the FDA, or trying to control some minutia of business regulation.
I think it's the inherent flaw with democracy is how much wasteful spending you have to put towards marketing. Like there's just so much marketing that has to be done for democracy to work, because especially when you have 500 million people, or however many we have in America right now, what are we, like 400 or something? Yeah. Like when you're marketing to getting close to 500 million people, that requires a lot of money, just in general. And that's just when you're running multiple politicians, there's all this massive amounts of wealth that has to be funneled into that could be going elsewhere, but instead it's marketing budgets, right? Like that's essentially what it is. And that's the inherent flaw as a whole. But I don't think you can get away with that, or get away from that.
If we didn't have senators being elected by the public directly, if it was still that senators were elected by the state legislators, that would be far less money spent, right? Yeah. That would all be money spent on a much narrower effort.
It'd also make local elections more important.
Yes, it would. Make it a lot more important.
Yeah, that's one of the big things that happened in 1913 was senators stopped being directly, or senators became direct directly elected by the citizens. They used to be, and most people don't even realize this, really.
Yeah, this is not very well known.
Yeah, they used to be elected by the state legislatures. So like you voting for your local legislator was also a vote for your senator, right?
Yeah. That was a constitutional amendment, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
1913 came in with the income tax and the Federal Reserve and everything terrible that happened in 1913.
God damn it, Wilson.
What a terrible inflection point for this country.
Yeah,
1913.
Terrible time, right?
Crazy. So
Well,
anyways,
thaning you for entertaining my tangent.
Yeah,
I think
of
it's
course. No, it's
very
all right.
interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Turkey.
yeah, maybe going on to that. Maybe a hard transition from the migrant crisis to also the migrant crisis.
Hey.
So to set the stage here, let's set the stage. Mayor Eric Adams was indicted last night. The indictment got unsealed this morning, and a lot of conservatives have been hypothesizing on why now? Why is this happening? Why is he getting indicted? And this clip has been rolling around, and maybe this could be the reason why now rather than some other time, when apparently this stuff's been going on for many years, right? So
support. And let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City. We're getting 10,000 migrants a month. One time we were just getting Venezuela. Now we're getting Ecuador. Now we're getting Russian speaking coming through Mexico. Now we're getting Western Africa. Now we're getting people from all over the globe have made their minds up that they're going to come through the southern part of the border and come into New York City. And everyone is saying it's New York City's problem. Every community in this city is going to be impacted. We had a $12 billion deficit that we're going to have to cut. Every service in this city is going to be impacted. All of us. And so I say to you, as I turn it over to you, this is some of the most educated, some of the most knowledgeable, probably more of my commissioners and deputy commissioners and chiefs live in this community. So as you asked me a question about migrants, tell me what role you played.
yeah. And he also goes on, he kind of calls out the Biden-Harris administration and other clips. And this is the area where a lot of people are like, oh, are the Democrats just kind of like turning on their own? Because before this indictment even came out, we had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I butchered her name, AOC.
Why don't we just abbreviate? That's
AOC. It's a long name. Saying, I do not see how Mayor Adams can continue governing New York City. The flood of resignations and vacancies are threatening government function. Nonstop investigations will make it impossible to recruit and retain a qualified administration. For the good of the city, he should resign. This is like right before all this stuff came out.
Yesterday.
Yep, yesterday. Because he got hit with the indictments last night, like late last night. And then this morning, his mansion got raided by the FBI, like early in the morning. It was still dark out. And the Mayor Adams camp said they're just trying to make a spectacle. I look forward to seeing them in court. And, he did the posturing.
Not worried about the tapes? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, the FBI would leave them and then they would disappear anyway.
Well, I know.
Was he on the Diddy tapes?
Well, here's an example right here. Here's him giving Diddy the key to the city.
Whoa! It's all connected to the diddler.
Because Diddy got arrested last week, But this is one of the things. So the indictment got unsealed this morning. And what it was conspiracy, count one, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, federal program bribery, and to receive campaign contributions by foreign nationals. Count two, wire fraud. Count three, solicitation of a contribution by a foreign national. Count four, the same thing. And count five, bribery. So he was under investigation back in like 2021. Yeah, it was back in 21, where allegedly he had accepted bribes from a Turkish entity. And so there's a lot of ties that people suggest are associated with Turkey. And that he's getting a bunch of Turkish contributions into all of his stuff.
Just sounds like he likes Thanksgiving, guys. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's just
He's
big
just an
Thanksgiving.
American.
It's
He's
a
very
country. Yeah, okay, so help me out here. What is the benefit? What is the connection to Turkey though? Like, what is it about New York City and Turkey? Like, what is that?
I don't know. I really don't know why that would
See how
be.
this
So
develops.
yeah. So like, here's just like I listed out a bunch of scandals that I found over the past few years with him, and this will just kind of see that this has been ongoing for 3 years now of all this type of stuff. So he basically he's had an insane amount of people in his inner circle getting raided by the FBI, retiring, which is kind of what AOC was alluding to, and various sexual misconduct charges, kind of like Cuomo. You kind of got that too, that happened there. His campaign linked to Turkish groups giving foreign money, investigations into a nightclub security business owned by the twin brother of Edward Caban, who was the New York Police Department commissioner, who just resigned like a week ago and also got raided by the FBI. And then the New York Police Department interim commissioner, Tom Donlon, his house was also raided by the FBI. And then there was a possible bribery scheme involving a government consultant whose two brothers are high-ranking city officials. Ongoing investigation into Adams' director of Asian affairs. She was also raided by the FBI.
Wow.
New York City Schools Commissioner David Banks retiring by the end of the year. His phones were seized by the FBI earlier this year. They're allegedly not connected. His retirement and his phones being seized. And the list goes on. Like, I just found there's just a whole host of things. That was just kind of the initial ones that caught my eye when I was just picking through them on an Axios article.
So earlier in the show, we established the link between state intelligence and organized crime. We know that the DOJ doesn't often investigate their own, but here we have the intelligence state coming down super hard on Eric Adams and pretty much everyone around him and other people in high positions of power within New York City. Is this because the people on the ground that are dealing with the migrant crisis are changing their tune, like Eric Adams was just saying, and realizing we're going to go down with this ship? Like, they're going to be blamed for the failure of New York City under their watch with all these migrants coming in. They're going to be blamed for massive budget deficits. They're like, we're totally screwed if we let this go on. We have to change course here. And then the other powers that be say no.
So one of the strange coincidences here, coincidence is not required, the arrangement of events is that how long this has been a problem in New York City, how long it's been a problem for this particular guy, and then to have it pulled off just now, this close to election season.
Yeah.
Right now, just after he is starting to make noise, after being a good guy, being a good boy about not making noise on migrants, is now making noise about it. That's the coincidence of like, it's a strange timing situation. Oftentimes, you don't do this right leading into election season. Is he up for election right now?
Not sure.
Yeah, so that would be an interesting one too.
He came in 2021, I believe. So he ran in 2020. So
he's probably up in 25 then.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I think it's something like that.
Most governors are elected in 4-year cycles and off years.
Well, and also remember all
quite a few are.
Remember all the stink that was made with
next June.
Next June. Okay. So it might be to get him out of the way to get someone else in time.
Remember all the stink.
Could be the time.
Yeah. Remember all the stink though that was made. Remember DeSantis like sending up the migrants down to New York and all that stuff that was happening too. And he's like, we welcome them all. We're a diverse city and all this stuff, right? It reminds me, and the details are foggy on this for me right now, but it reminds me of Governor Cuomo. When he got hit with all the sexual misconduct stuff, where remember we went through many months of COVID of everybody was Cuomo-sexual and he was the next big thing, right?
Yeah.
Remember it was like you had celebrities wearing shirts and hats that said Cuomo-sexual and all that stuff, right? And conservatives, rightfully so, were like, yeah, but look, what about the retirement homes and all this stuff? And there was a bunch of reports and it was like the media just swept that stuff under the rug. It did not matter. And then I remember there being this very specific thing that kind of went under the radar where there was some deal with the UN and vaccines coming into the city or something like that. And he rejected something that like the establishment really wanted. And then it was like a week later, oh, grandmas are dying, and sexual harassment. He's like, forgive me, I'm Italian.
Right. That's literally what he said. That's not a misquote.
And then Chris Cuomo got booted from CNN shortly after that too, and it was like all that stuff went down all in that time frame. And it makes me think of Chris Cuomo was the next big thing. He went against Andrew Cuomo was the next big thing. He went against the establishment forces of whatever was going on during the COVID regime in like a very specific instance that was kind of under the radar. And then all of a sudden, snap, you're out.
Yeah.
And this kind of feels like that to me, where it's like, there's a lot of things that he could have been hit on over a long time period. And it's like, now is the time. That's where things are kind of
It's a sheer scale of the accusations, both on him personally and across his administration, is what's so strange about this. And it's all coming together right now.
Yeah.
Interesting time.
Yeah.
Or it could just be that all these investigations just happen to get to critical mass at the same time right now.
Right before a major election.
Yeah.
Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
Totally legit.
And as he's turning his tone on the migrant issue too, like that's one of the big things too, where it's like there's a lot of strange timing that exists with this, and it's like we can only just put these pieces together, and maybe there's real connections, maybe there's not. We're not sure.
I mean, look at it.
It seems to be something like that.
Even if you're part of the DOJ that was very interested in making sure Kamala wins, you're not looking at New York and be like, oh no, these delegates are going to go for Trump. Like, that's not going to happen. In no universe does that happen. Regardless of what happens here, they're going to go for Kamala no matter what. So it isn't clear that it's for like election purposes, but it could just be narrative formation. It could just be that. It doesn't have to be narrowly focused on the election outcome. So,
yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it progresses. It feels like it's going to, because even though you might not live in New York, but the mayor of New York is one of the most powerful positions in America. It's, biggest city in America. The mayor of New York is governing over top of like the population of multiple states put together. Right? Like this, like the mayor of New York has far more power than like the governor of Montana, right? Like it's a way more powerful position just in terms of the massive population that you're governing over.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, what's New York's population? Like 6 million or something like that actually live in the city?
Yeah, but then you also have like outside the city. I think altogether,
I think it's like I think it's about 18 million when everyone like commutes in and like
I
works
think
in the
that's
city
correct.
and stuff.
Estimated population of the city in 2024 was just over 8 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then that's not including everything else
that's not
around
including the people from Connecticut and Jersey.
Yeah, because
commute.
then there's like 10 million people that are, there's probably like 18 million total that are part of the New York ecosystem. Really.
Interesting little tidbit here though. This reflects a decline of approximately 7.36% since the last census in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, a bunch of people left during COVID, but they've definitely brought way more in since then.
Yeah, so
migrants,
it'll be an interesting next census.
Yeah, we'll see.
Well, if they can even register them.
But they'll be able to read about it on Twitter if you live in Brazil now.
Good hard transition.
So Elon Musk, in our This Week in Censorship, Elon Musk reverses his strategy on Brazil, now complying with judge orders. And this released last Friday night. The lawyers from X put out a thing saying, we're going to comply with your demands. Covered by the New York Times and a bunch of other places. Just a quick background, in case you missed our awesome monologue on it. I got to get you my login for New York Times, Kyle. Sorry, buddy.
I'm just going to cheat it.
So the background was that Brazil, the judge Moraes, started issuing all of these takedown orders. Thousands of people and lots of like very specious orders specifically taken down for criticizing the Brazilian government or criticizing this guy particularly.
Ordering X to take down these accounts, take down these tweets and stuff like that.
And it wasn't just X, to be fair. It was also Facebook and Threads and all these other places. But X was the one that said, no, that's illegal to do so by Brazilian's constitution, by Brazil's constitution. The judge then seized X assets, including their building, and threatened to charge X employees as criminals. It threatens to incarcerate them. Fines issued for use of a VPN to access X were issued at $10,000 a day, which is greater than the median income in Brazil.
Wow.
Did anything ever happen with that? I remember Glenn Greenwald, because Glenn Greenwald lives in Brazil.
Yeah.
And he was still accessing Twitter via VPN as a protest. And also just that is his livelihood, is existing on Twitter.
Right.
And did he ever? Was there anything that happened there? Did he end up getting hit with anything?
I haven't seen
the
anything from saying that he's
$6,000 a day fine or
Yeah,
whatever
that's what-
ridiculousness
exactly.
it was.
10,000.
10,000 pesos. I think I think that comes out to like 6,000.
About $60.
Got it.
$60. I don't know what the conversion is.
I don't either.
So they then shut down Starlink as well, and were threatening to seize Starlink assets in the country. And then Pavel Durov gets arrested in France, and then soon after, Elon complies.
Yeah,
and he hasn't issued any
interesting
tweets
timing.
of it that I've found so far. There's been no public communications really about it. It's just been a legal action to tell the Brazilian courts this. So it could be a delaying mechanism. It could be a buy time mechanism. Yeah. It could be a lot of things. I was a little bit frustrated. A lot of people who are otherwise good on this issue really came down hard on Elon as like a hypocrite here. I think that's overly harsh. He's got a lot of things going on against him right now. He has EU and UK censorship bills. He has other national bills like Ireland's censorship bill that is now they're going to be complied with. If you look at the ex-jobs board, it's full of government relations roles open for people to take all over the country. Oh, I applied. Oh yeah, I checked it out. They haven't called me back.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's very easy to like armchair quarterback it and just be like, oh, Elon's caving. It's like, you have to understand how many wars he's fighting right now.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Totally.
pretty rough.
He has a lawsuit against the ADL, ironically, for defamation.
Right.
He has a lawsuit against a, quote, cartel of advertisers who are collaborating together to withhold advertising revenue from X. Rumble joined that.
Go f yourself.
Right. And that was the lawsuit that they
antitrust lawsuit. Yep. And then there's also just the extreme length of Moraes. I mean, he threatened X's a Brazilian legal representative with imprisonment. Like the person on the ground in X, employed by them, who was supposed to be defending X in court, was going to put their lawyer in jail.
That's crazy.
You know, and even after that person resigned, Moraes still froze her bank accounts.
Jeez.
Yeah.
This guy is just an absolute dictator.
Yeah.
And he's not even the president.
He wears capes and everything. It's crazy.
He does.
Yeah,
he looks like a villain.
Don't put your judges in charge of your in charge of your election systems. It's a terrible way to structure your
It's
government.
crazy. When I looked into that, I was just like, all the connections that sat there, and their system is so screwed. It just...
Yeah.
This Judge Moraes guy is just he's rough. And he's going to continue causing so many problems here. Their system is just so corrupt, and it's so obvious, and how much intertangling there is with the like censorship mafia that exists within our whole apparatus and our sphere of influence. It goes deep. A lot of CIA carve-outs that exist there that are sitting there and creating all of these problems for all of our social media networks. It's just so overt, right?
Yeah.
It's a judge sitting in a chair, be like, I don't like that tweet, and I'm going to write an email, that sort of thing.
Right.
America, we just do the same thing. We just do it subtly. A great example is TikTok.
We pretend that we don't do it.
Yeah,
where they're just like, nah. Right.
Well, we say you're giving disinformation because you're controlled by the Chinese, so we're going to force you to sell your company to an American company, et cetera, right? That's how we did that. And now if you go onto TikTok, try to find something about the Israel-Palestine on TikTok right now. Near impossible.
Really?
You can't even find commentary about it. Right? It gets suppressed by their algorithm. Why? Because we basically said, if you don't do this, we're going to make you sell. Now they're still in the court process of that bill and all that kind of stuff, but it's obviously the pressure isn't on anymore. All that media like narrative pressure is gone.
Yeah.
And we know that was because they were allowing people to speak freely about topics that certain segments of the American population that were in power did not like.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Well, yeah, this is really interesting, and I think to just speak to the piece about how existential this is for Elon. I mean, Mike Benz on Tucker's show when he was talking about the censorship bills and things going on in Europe, brought to light, like if Elon loses Europe, that's it for X, right? Because it's an enormous market, bigger than the US. Brazil also has a tremendously large population. Elon's probably looking at this, like a game of risk, right? Like, can I afford to cede any of these grounds? Of course, he's committed principally to being an advocate for free speech, but like you mentioned before we started recording, I'm sure he's got a tremendous amount of pressure from creditors and, investors, advertisers, people that are like interested stakeholders in X saying like, dude, we got to keep this company alive. We don't want to lose $48 billion or whatever we just spent to buy this thing, right?
Yeah, and it's the largest social media company in the world, right? So like it going down would be a huge blow for global communications, for our ability to do lots of things that are outside of the internal dynamics of Brazil, potentially. I mean, you could make that case. Additionally, that it's probably not worth as much as he bought it for, because we know there's a huge bot problem. And then on top of that, he has all the advertisers pulling out okay, hold on. Just one pause real quick. This was tickling me earlier today. Why do advertisers care about what speech is next to their advertisement? Like, that's insane.
Well, they don't want their brand associated with a message that they don't support.
That's the argument. But you're advertising on social media. Like that's the thing that drives me crazy about it, is like, it seems like, to me, a generated argument for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Like someone who doesn't own a business said, hey, you don't want your information, your advertisement about your business socks you sell to be right next to hate speech, do you? Like the business owner's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that would happen. Like that sort of thing seems to me to be artificial. It doesn't seem real.
Yeah.
Like the business community was like waiting around, very concerned, and then brought this up. No, I don't think so.
I think the concerns, though, is you have a lot of trust and safety people at businesses that get really scared of the viral hate mob that will happen if their product gets put in a screenshot next to something else, and then a narrative forms around it. Right. And those narrative forms are things that are very hard for you to control without like exceptional PR teams, and it creates a lot more. And that work
itself was generated. We know from the ADL lawsuit that they specifically generated hate speech next to advertisers, took a screenshot of it, and then like they controlled the hate speech that they put next to the advertisers.
They created like bot accounts to put around and to try to like force algorithmic stuff, but also just to get screenshots with no name bot accounts, basically.
Yeah, didn't Elon release documents that showed that?
Yeah.
Well, it greatly suggests it. Now, the court process will figure out if that's how true that is or how systematic it was. But that itself, it just signals to me an operation, a thing that you're doing to manipulate this, and it makes sense, right? That is within the mission of the censorship industrial complex, as described by, the Public and Schellenberger and Mike Benz and all these guys, describing how they operate in order to put pressure on private actors that they otherwise couldn't put pressure on, right? It would be illegal for them to do that directly. The FBI can't just show up at, Procter & Gamble and be like, hey, you got to get off X because we said so, right? What they got to do is run this operation with like very covertly saying, hey, did you notice this, getting these crowds of people who are funded by NGOs to then push them out of funding for that so that they can control the media landscape.
Well, also, this goes back to what we were saying with a lot of the propaganda around foreign policy and things like that. It's like it's the same type of tactics. It's how you control these democracies that you prop up. Is you have all these government, like CIA carve-outs and these NGOs and all of these things, all of the alphabet soup that they all use, and you start to sway narratives and create like hate mobs and create propaganda around that. It's the same tactic as being used here.
Yeah,
right?
it's just done now to prevent populism rather than to prevent communism, because populism is the biggest threat to the American hegemony role in the world of dominating all these countries around the world. As soon as populism says, hey, I care more about my country than what's going on in Ukraine, that's a threat to the military-industrial complex, all the money-making, all the NGOs, all the democracy-spreading mechanism of covert operations.
Yo, we got missiles to sell.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how much better life would be without all this bullshit?
Yeah, right.
Like it's exhausting. Like
it's crazy.
Can't I just tweet? Can't I just freaking buy stuff without? Oh my God! Like, can I live my life? Will you just let us live our lives? You freaking animals, go. Get a life, dude. Why do you have to run everybody else's?
Yo, State Department, get a life.
Go fishing.
Get a life, State
fucking
Department.
touch grass, nerd.
Yeah.
But if you do that, then the commies will win, right? If you do that, then Russia will be able to take over Ukraine. If you like just still manning it. We listened to that on our road trip. We listened to those two CIA agents.
I recommended that to you guys. Yeah,
talking back and forth and looking at that guy. Though there's one guy who was like
John Kiriakou, who is the whistleblower of
Abu Ghraib.
Yeah. torture tactics with the CIA and things. And then it's the Andrew Bustamante, the crazy hair guy
that guy is infuriating.
Yeah, but he's a true believer. Like he really believes this stuff. And one of the things interesting there is his mental model of the world is America's government exists to perpetuate America's power, and that's good for American citizens because America being powerful is good.
Also, it doesn't matter how much you have to lie to the public and things like that.
Yeah, anything we do in pursuit of that is legitimate because that's what the role of government is. That's how he sees it, including suppressing the speech of Americans, right? Including manipulating all these things abroad that have the sacrifices of the freedom of individuals all over the world. Even as we say to our mission to Americans, which he knows is bullshit, that the goal of U.S. foreign policy is to spread freedom around the world.
It was pretty
classic,
funny.
The road to hell type of thing.
Paid with good intentions.
Yeah.
Well, it was very funny in that moment where Bustamante was talking about that and kind of laying out his vision and things like that. And Kiriaku's like, God, you're a true believer. It was like, and Kiriaku's a guy who's very skeptical of it because his life pretty much got ruined for being a whistleblower.
Oh yeah, the government sued him into the ground and charged him with all this stuff, and he got lost his career,
blacklisted everywhere, and all that stuff.
Life was turned upside down.
So in a similar way, who also got their life turned upside down by the intelligence issues, Alex Jones is being ordered by the judge to pay his $1 billion in defamation fees.
1.5 billion?
Yeah.
Wow. So before it was like, we're going to let you keep InfoWars open so you can pay this over time.
Yeah.
Now it's like lump sum.
Yeah.
Where the fuck is Alex Jones going to get $1.5 billion?
It seems like in a few months, InfoWars is going down unless something happens.
Well, right, but
I was gonna say, isn't like InfoWars up, like being sold?
Yes. So I mean, well, the story I saw was that InfoWars is being ordered to sell at auction in order to pay this. But there's no way that InfoWars is worth $1.5 billion.
Well, it'll be all of their assets, will be everything else, sells the highest bidder. Then he declares bankruptcy and can then move on, right? That's pretty much what's going to happen, would be my guess. Yeah. Now, I want to remind you to stick with the censorship thing, because it's like, well, isn't that just a bunch of random people or a bunch of people who he victimized by doing the speech and all that kind of stuff about Sandy Hook victims? Well, you might have thought so until Sound Investigations got a FBI/CIA, he kind of bounced back and forth between FBI and CIA, on record in a hidden, date situation, similar to OMG.
It's not James O'Keefe,
actually. It's not, but I love that it's
a rare moment where it's not his Asian spy.
He got, Gavin O'Blinnis. O'Blinnis? Yeah, he's a contracting officer with the CIA, and he says he mentioned work for the FBI to confess on camera that they reached out to the Sandy Hook victims' families and nudged them to file a lawsuit because he says here, because it would be illegal for us just to get rid of Alex Jones. So what we did is we went to the families and said, you need to go do this. And
they said you could do this.
Yes.
Like they didn't compel them to. They just said, this is something that you could do.
Well, wink. And it's sort of like in the Twitter files where it's like, hey, there's all these people spreading hate speech and here's all this data. Aren't you going to do something about it?
Yeah.
Suggestions.
And imagine you're talking to the FBI and this is what they're saying to you.
Yeah.
We don't have to watch. We can watch the video if we want.
No.
But basically, just summarizing it, I know we don't want to run too long, but that's his case, and he lays it out, and you can check it out. Sound Investigations. Go into their website, search for.
We also
FBI.
have talked about this on a previous episode, but I'm blanking on what episode.
Pretty sure we did. It happened back in March.
Yeah. I should mark that down. I did find this using our old notes, which is like a great repository of news stories if you want to search.
Yeah,
we just go through our Google Drive.
And lastly, in censorship, Zuck is making a turn. He's coming back around, guys.
What a bad time to become a libertarian.
What a great time. What are you talking about?
No. Dude, look what's going on with Elon. Elon's out here just like, like freaking Iwo Jima trying to hold up free speech in the world. And Zuck's like, hey guys.
He's showing up a little late to the party. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, kind of.
But there's also a thing to remember this. And, I'm not necessarily one to just defend Zuck because I was taken down from all of his platforms when I got purged from everything. But there is an important reminder is that Zuck was very actively against the censorship apparatus in 2018 and 2019 before he got advertisement bombed like Elon's been going. And then he caved.
And his advertising model was on a huge scale. It was like $6 billion. It was an enormous.
I think it was like $60 billion.
Yeah, no, it was the market cap of Facebook lost like $60 billion.
Yeah. So didn't Benz talk about that on the Tucker?
He did, yes.
Because he called Zuckerberg a double-digit billionaire,
That's right.
and Elon's a triple-digit billionaire.
He's like, maybe the triple digit can help you in this.
So the article reads, quote, out of public eye, Mark Zuckerberg identifies with libertarianism, or at least that's according to the few sources privy to his private political thoughts. As Zuckerberg attempts to convince Republicans that he and his company Meta are nonpartisan, sources told New York Times that he's sunk into a political cynicism. So, and he hired, and what the real story is, and the actual like action was that he hired a Republican strategist to repair his image amongst the right. And this is obviously part of that. That Republican strategist then went out and said, hey, did you know he identifies with libertarianism? Because he can't come out as a Republican, because then it's like, oh, do you support, pro-life and all these things, so he can come out as libertarian, and no one knows what that means. So they go like, oh, he's a right-winger now.
Right. I think that there's a probable likelihood that it's not a total BS in that. I think that's very true. Like I think Dorsey's the same way. It's just that they were locked into a system and they kind of became part of this thing that they built, and it became so big, and it became there's so much outside influence and internal influence in it, where it's like, to me, Zuck, I feel like really he just wants to like play around with VR. I think that's really what the dude wants to do. Have you seen the glasses
they announced on those?
Yeah, I think that's like what he really wants to do. But then you end up getting wrapped into this, and you end up having in 2020. You have the Zuck Foundation giving $400 million for election efforts and things like that. And like, we're talking $400 million compared to a $60 billion crash that happened the year before, right? Like,
but $400 million for mail-in ballot boxes is a significant amount of money that could be viewed as something that was able to sway that election.
No, I agree. And I agree. And I think that he's regretting that right now. Well, but I think some of this element is him playing ball, right? Like he has to do things for his shareholders and kind of keep these government relations, especially when we're talking about the digital privacy or the digital, what's the act in Europe? The digital
EU Digital Services Act.
Digital Services Act. When like he has to play ball with the State Department in certain regards, because they are the lobbying arm that can affect the change that is going to affect the social media business with the Digital Securities Act, right? Like there's all of these kind of entangling webs that happen there, and he's stuck in the middle of it all.
I get that, and I think that you're probably right about that, but I don't buy this.
What?
I don't buy this.
What?
I mean,
why not?
Look, I think I don't know what Zuck believes. You can't read his mind or anything like that. But his actions have spoken one thing in every instance, and we have to take him at his actions. Right? That's the evidence of his ideology at work, and maybe some other factors. But to me, it seems possible that he's just seeing the writing on the wall that Trump is going to have a second term, and the tech industry is rallying behind him in a lot of ways. He's completely out of step with that. Yeah. And if he wants to have any influence in this new administration and not be a target in this new administration, he needs to bring himself into line there. And so that's a rebranding effort, not a real innate political ideological change. And I think that if he wants to prove that it actually is, and that he's not just, trying to massage some messaging here, we need to see action in the contrary to what we've seen before, like meaningful stuff, like unban all the accounts that you banned. Right? Undo the censorship apparatus that you've implemented. Yeah. If you can't, if he wants to plant a flag and say, I'm really on the other side of this, then stand there next to Elon and fight this shit.
Yeah.
There's 3 things.
Go.
Now I think I might have lost. One, he did a massive firing after Elon. He's one of the many tech companies that did a massive firing where everybody's just like, wait, Elon did it. Maybe we can do it, because stock price is annoyingly often tied to how many jobs you're producing. So it's just like, oh, let's just keep making a bunch of nonsense jobs, and that ends up being like, ooh, stock price goes up because of that. And like for some reason, that's a factor that people look at, not like, well, how efficient are like the amount of jobs, So there's that element where I think that a lot of these tech companies, just in general, I think that there's a lot of these CEO types that were kind of non-political and just playing the game for many years. For like the last decade, they were kind of just playing the game. And then there's an increasing cynicism towards politics as a whole among these types. And I think we're seeing that across the Silicon Valley crowd as a whole. And some of that might be, oh, we're just jumping onto the new wave. There's an element of that, and there's an element too of the book that's coming out. I don't think it's out yet. That is supposed to be like Trump's campaign book that's happening like a month before the election. Allegedly, in the book, it says that he told Zuckerberg personally, Trump did, that he would throw Zuckerberg in jail if he did any tampering and interference with the election. Right. So there's also that threat that might be lingering there. Yeah, it was like life in prison was, I believe, the words, right? So I think that is convoluted. It's messy. I think that I would like if all of these people like Zuckerberg, Dorsey, et cetera, took real stands when it mattered. I understand that those stands were probably very tough. I think a lot of them, they didn't think that the stands were as necessary as they might have been. I think there's some of that. And I think there's probably a lot of cowardice that exists with it too.
Yeah,
right?
A lot of covering of your own ass.
Yep. I think I think all of those things are very real.
Yeah.
One thing I've long suspected was that his wife, Priscilla Chan, because it's the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation, was
founder of 4chan, by the way.
Yeah.
That's not true. Wouldn't that be funny?
That would be funny though.
The hacker 4chan?
The hacker 4chan. Was maybe the driving force behind the foundation works than him. That's often the case for a lot of tech CEOs.
Yeah.
But not always true. It might have been that kind of swung that way. How much do you hold him accountable for his wife's actions? How much do you hold him accountable for being literally a man under a gun, and being captured by powers that he couldn't possibly fight? I mean, think about it. The government has the real power. We look at money like it's power, and then there's a sense in which it's soft power. But the real power is, can I ruin your life or not? Right.
Totally.
And you could take everything from this guy.
Yeah.
And he's saying, and like maybe he just wants to play around in VR and be a goofball nerd, and he's forced in this position.
That's fine. All I want to do is go fishing and play golf, but I have to fight censorship industrial complex.
Yeah, but that's not. So my point is that's not Zuck's fault. He's a victim in this as well.
No, it's not.
You could look at him as he's a hypocrite and he's doing this cynically, and that might be true. There's incentives that kind of say that, or this is just who he really was the entire time.
Maybe. And
what he's doing is trying to become more overt so that he can rebrand himself and get the opportunities there while actually just being himself.
And that's fine. Like, I don't begrudge somebody for being a victim of government coercion.
Right.
I don't begrudge somebody for just being strategic and understanding, well, hey, maybe I don't have a strong ideology, but I understand that this is a valuable move to make. But I just hold that at arm's length.
Right.
And I have to take him at the results of his actions before I'm going to say, Zuckerberg's a changed man, and all of a sudden he's like this anointed libertarian, whatever. It's like, whatever. I don't buy it, and he has to prove it to me, and he has to prove it to a lot of people. But I would say just
he still has to prove it to me. There's still a...
But I do think...
I would say the final piece, though, really quick, just to your point about the government has the real power. This could be blackpilling, because if Zuckerberg, one of the richest people, most influential, powerful people with one of the biggest microphones in the world, can't take this on, can't lead a movement that resists this stuff and makes the world a better place, then who the hell can?
But look at Elon right now. Look at all the struggle that he has to go through.
Exactly.
It's the anti-sovereign individual thesis, right? And this is true going consistently back. If you look at Microsoft was the biggest software company in the world until they got taken up on antitrust, and they didn't have a lobbying center. There was no tech lobbying center before the late 90s when all of a sudden government decided to come after Microsoft on behalf of Apple to say you can't have an operating system that also comes with a word processor. That was the big issue of that day. And then they generated the largest lobbying firm in the world.
Yeah.
Right. Which is big tech now, based around Microsoft, and now it's Google, Microsoft, and all these other products. So my thing is like, and I totally agree with everything you're saying. My thing is, there has been so much hate thrown at this particular individual because of these actions, and I think that's deserved in a sense. But it's also like we didn't have the whole story. And if you tell the whole story, all of a sudden he changes from just a tool of the intelligence state that's willingly going along with everything because he just wants to make a buck and he's a greedy billionaire, to He's just a dude who wants to run his company, and there are people who are coming after his company, and he wants to employ all those people and continue doing the thing that he thinks is valuable, which is connecting the world and providing a place for people to talk.
Sure.
And if that's true, then we could recast him as, okay, well, maybe that I think that we should come at it with a sense of graciousness. To that situation.
Certainly, and I grant him that opportunity.
Because I do think there's a lot of conservatives who are going to go, I don't believe you, screw you, you'll never have a place in this home, God damn it, Mark Zuckerberg, and that sort of thing. I just think that's counterproductive and not very helpful.
It's also, he does kind of fit in with a lot of right-wing circles. Like, he's a big MMA guy, right? And he's one of the guys that's always in the crowd at every UFC event.
And I do wonder how much
VIP backroom networking that goes on, because Dana White has effectively created a right-wing networking center, or a dissident unity party networking center, or something like that, right? And Zuckerberg is part of that networking that exists, which is an interesting dynamic.
And I wonder too, and just speculating, is to what degree getting in touch with his actual masculinity as a person by training MMA is something that has got him to the place where he has a little bit more courage now, a little bit more capability of standing up.
Sure. I think that's very possible.
That arc makes sense to me based upon what I've seen in watching men go from not physically active, not able to defend themselves, to then becoming physically capable, and then being able to stand up to their boss or do the thing that they really feel like they've been needed to do, but their testosterone, their identity, their sense of self was so repressed by their lifestyle that they didn't have it. And then they do, right? Because they generated it.
I also know for a fact that this is shareholders of major tech companies were looking at what Elon did, and they're wanting that type of thing to happen in the other publicly traded companies that exist. Is they watched the dynamic of 80% haircut across the board at Twitter. Wait, why can't we do that? Stock's going down, like, we can do that. But for so often, the C-suites of all these companies were sitting there like, well, we can't do this because it would make stock go down. Like, I know that those are the types of conversations that were happening. And where in like the 2 quarters after the Elon takeover of Twitter, all of a sudden we started seeing massive reductions that were and like Microsoft destroying their DEI board and all this stuff, right? So there's a change that's happening in those companies as they're kind of fighting and pushing against the DEI, ESG takeover that happened within them. I actually want to go back to something you were saying about the wife, Priscilla Chan.
Yeah.
Peter Thiel.
People from China, they love me.
What?
Thank you.
Just having fun.
Peter Thiel, when he was on Rogan a few weeks ago, he was talking about how these big billionaire types create these foundations for their wives when they're in struggling marriages.
I was kind of referencing that without referencing it.
Yeah, I was just like, I would recommend going back and listening to that. They used Bill Gates as the example with everything that was with everything that was going with Melinda as ways of keeping them from getting too much money for what might be an eventual divorce. And there's all this like shell game money tactics that are going on between the husband and the wife. And often in their philanthropic efforts, most of these billionaire philanthropic efforts he was basically alluding to are these ways of keeping the family, or keeping the money for the kids, and not letting the wife take out too much money and extract too much in eventual divorce.
Yeah, basically it makes it a cheaper divorce.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting dynamic. And it just, whenever I see these philanthropical efforts, it's like, yeah, sometimes they're probably like good hearted and stuff like that. But then when you hear Peter explain the Bill Gates Melinda situation, you're like, oh, yeah, there's some dynamics that are going on there.
Clinton Foundation.
So speaking of stocks that Soros Foundation was done the same way. Open Society Foundation, that is. So speaking of stocks that are not going down.
Speaking of, Alex Soros is like marrying Uma Abedin.
Yeah. Oh,
isn't that weird? There's some weird dynamics.
Anyways,
Alex Soros is the new George Soros. He's the kid.
Yeah.
The new devil in chief.
Okay, so Raytheon is not going down. They're doing well. Yeah.
Are
Lockheed
they?
Martin? I don't know. They should be because we are deploying more troops to the Middle East.
Number goes up.
Bomb go down, number go up.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Inverse relationship right there.
Getting some non-endorsed financial advice. Bomb goes down, number goes up.
Not financial advice.
Not financial advice.
Are we going to war? Well, we know what goes up during war.
Yeah, so across
John
the Middle
Bolton.
East.
That's imagery I could have used it though.
Come on. Okay. All right. You're right. That was too far.
Yikes.
Well, he is fully erect now because Lebanon, Israel's invading Lebanon. Okay, so it isn't clear that it's a ground invasion, but there is an increasing amount of overflights, rocket attacks into Lebanon. We had the pager attack, remember? And then soon after, we have a responding attack from Hezbollah, although they've been shooting rockets back and forth for a long time now. And then the U.S. is simultaneously committing more troops to the Middle East. A U.S. base was also hit with rockets just this morning, I believe it was. Last night.
Yes, in Syria, was it?
Yeah.
What did Kamala say during the debate?
Oh no troops in combat zones. What are you talking about?
All right.
No.
Just double check.
Have you seen that video? Those guys are like, no,
Where
U.S.
the
troops.
fuck are we right now?
They're like in a tent.
That's so good. And I want to note that there's we kind of highlighted this really briefly, but I think people who are interested in how this might play out should look to the 2007 invasion of Lebanon and what happened then, because that was a ground invasion specifically to get a set of Israeli citizens who were captured by Hezbollah, and it looks really bad. When you look at that particular fight, Israel has tremendous air advantages, sea advantages, things like that, especially with U.S. support. And of course, they have excellent intel, technology. But when it comes to on the ground battles, it did not play out well in 2007. So I wonder if they're going to be deploying troops on the ground to go into Lebanon. But at least this is that. And then we also had a series of articles came out in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, profiling the people in North Israel who have basically been pushed out of their homes for the last year and how they want to go back. And the question is will this operation allow them to? Hezbollah simultaneously has said, we'll stop fighting you the minute you give Gaza, rights and cut a deal, a ceasefire and a deal to establish a state for the people of the West Bank and Gaza. That is kind of where we're sitting at right now with the increasing pressure in the Middle East for a regional war.
Is Hezbollah the ruling party in Lebanon, or is it just a terrorist organization that's sort of independent of the state of Lebanon?
Yeah, they're not the same as the state, but they are functionally their military.
Okay,
and it's kind of looking at like they're a functioning military. They're kind of combined with the military, but they also exist independent from them in a sense. They receive funds independently, but have independent command structures from state sponsors like Iran. Lebanon has existed since 2007 in a very fluid place, I guess would be the way to say it. That they're
gender fluid.
They're nation fluid.
They're nation fluid.
Yeah. So the rule, so it would be their ability to cut a deal would stick with whatever the Lebanese government would say, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they're kind of integrated with it, would be a way to think about it.
Gotcha. So in the sense that Hamas was sort of like the ruling party, if you will, of Palestine, Hezbollah is a little different from that.
Of Gaza specifically.
Of Gaza,
There's a different ruling part. I'm forgetting who they are right now for the West Bank.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's sort of like the Azov battalion in Ukraine. It's like a militia force, but it's become kind of nationalized in a sense.
That would be an okay way to think about it.
It's not exactly that, but
neither like Jews.
Similar.
That's the other combining principle.
What? I thought it was only 1% of them.
Yeah, with the SS patches. So one of the things I think to look to right now, and we are getting, I think, to this phase and things because there's a war exhaustion. There's this constant, you can spend a lot of time looking at the Iron Dome shooting down rockets right now. Is what are the war aims and how we're going to get to a war aim confluence? And of course, the perverse incentive of Bibi Netanyahu and his existing, we talked about this a little bit last time with Clint, his dangling out there corruption charges and constitutional violation charges that are sitting out for him. He can't really be prosecuted while they're at a hot war. So does that provide a perverse incentive for him to do this? And then to what degree is this a keep the war going, occupy Hezbollah, fight Iran's proxies while the United States is obviously saber rattling on Iran too, to buy more time to better purge out Gaza of Hamas and or just punish the Palestinians in Gaza as much as possible to prevent another, crop of Hamas fighters in the near future.
Yeah. One of the lines of thinking I've seen on this is that by clearing out Hezbollah, or marginalizing them in terms of their ability to fight Israel, they're creating a more direct path of attack to Iran. Basically, they're removing like a proxy that Iran is using to battle Israel, such that it's becoming more likely that there will be a direct confrontation with Iran, either between Iran and Israel or the U.S. and Iran, probably both, if it were to happen.
Right.
What is your thought on that?
I'm not sure. I mean, like, Hezbollah is a very different sort of animal from Gaza, right? Their ability to import weapons and fight on the ground is very different. That said, it's a different era. 2007, a long time ago. Technology matters more in warfare now than it did even in 2007, especially when we look at drone warfare and things like that. So I don't know, on the other side of that, people matter, right? There's a lot of people in Lebanon who just had their sons and daughters and cousins and whatever just get blown up by a pager attack. So is it going to increase Hezbollah recruiting? You have the fundamental problem of terrorist math, and you can't just change a country by overthrowing their government. Or I don't know. Can you get rid of Hezbollah? Can you get rid of Hamas? I mean, it's an idea,
right?
It's like getting rid of terrorism by fighting a war against it. Can you do that? I mean, I am unpersuaded by the last 20 years of experience.
You would say no. Yeah,
it doesn't seem like it's working.
Yeah. I mean,
I do love how we're just at the point where we just gloss over by a pager attack.
Yeah, that's a thing now.
That's like a thing now.
Well, it actually stood out to me when David was like, by that pager attack, if you guys remember, and I was like, that was like a week and a half ago. But then I was like, well, people just like move on so quickly.
That's true.
And, so
and you might think we were referring to the 90s if you weren't paying attention. What?
Somebody's just like beating people over the head with pagers? It's crazy.
Yeah, so Gaza, where it's at right now, I did want to kind of check in on with that because I do think it's something that we haven't covered in a while. Where we're at when it comes to the impact on Gaza with these operations. We're sitting at 41,272 deaths, 95,000 injuries. So imagine the network effect of that on a place of 5 million people, I want to say.
Also 10,000 people missing.
10,000 people missing, yeah. So those are probably casualties. These are just people they couldn't find because the buildings fell on them.
Yeah, because half of the infrastructure is destroyed.
That's at least 10,000, to be clear.
Yeah.
A half of the infrastructure deployed, what we're talking about is sewers, water treatment, water delivery, all that kind of stuff. Now, it was already a bad scene in a lot of places in Gaza with that from other bombings and other situations. Obviously not made better by Israel's blockade of concrete. One of the reasons they said they blocked concrete is because Hamas was building tunnels with it. Understandable, but also tricky because just how many tunnels there are, we don't really know. And we can't trust the Israeli government to tell us the truth because it's a government and governments lie to you. In fact, that's what they exist to do. So you got to be careful about that. But when we look at these kind of reports out of it, 17 out of 36 hospitals are still in operation. So more than half the hospitals have been bombed out of commission. 35% of the roads are undamaged. That means almost all the roads are damaged to some degree. Most are not drivable. You have to walk. And then 85% of school buildings have been damaged. I don't know what damaged means in terms of like, does that mean it's no longer operational or what? But that kind of gives you a sense of like, even if all of these schools had Hamas fighters hiding them or weapons below them or something like that, the long-term impacts of what this means of like, what does it mean to rebuild Gaza? How do you even do that? Is it possible?
Well, that's exactly the thing is the psychology of there's not a peaceful outcome that comes from this in the aftermath. I just don't see it. You're going to have so many kids with this just resentful psychology towards the greater state of Israel, assuming that it becomes like the greater state of Israel in the aftermath of all this, where you're just it's going to continue. It's not even going to matter unless you just kill them all. Like, that's one option, I suppose.
Seems like that's what BB is trying to do.
Well, and it seems like the more right wing faction that he's aligned himself with during all this, that seems to be genocide is kind of the ideology of it. But yeah, it's just like, where do you go from here? Like, assuming everything turns into like a one-state solution or even a two-state solution, but it seems like the goal is one-state solution. Like, you're just going to have this faction of people that grew up remembering and watching their parents being slaughtered by and falling buildings and their schools exploding on them, and all this stuff, right? So you're like 20 years down the road, we got the new terrorists coming back in again, right? And that just seems to be where we're going to be at.
It doesn't seem like a possible solution. Like, it seemed like they had a solution idea, which was to move all of the population down to the Egyptian border and then basically put pressure on Egypt to then let them through. But Egypt said no. So it's like, now you're stuck. What do you do with all these people who are now refugees again in their own country?
Just put them in Ireland. You put them in New York. You put them in...
I was trying to export them around the world. Crazy, a country enforcing their border.
I know. I was like, if Egypt has a border and we don't, damn it.
Right. Egypt is controlling. Well, remember when Biden said that they're coming in through the southern Egyptian border when he met Mexico? Remember that? Wasn't that a thing?
I don't remember.
Or maybe it was the inverse.
Like
maybe it was the inverse. Maybe he meant to say Egypt and he called it the Mexican border or something.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember. He had a slip up like that.
I love it.
So the additional U.S. troops, the question is, what is the purpose of them? We talked last week about the different war games going on in Ukraine, China. Because of BRICS, there's all kinds of incentives to think that if something does start off in a direct hot war between the United States and Russia, that Iran would get involved. What would be that kind of like the pillar of that fight would be Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Israel versus Iran. So you'd want to create infrastructure in that space. And then for China, it would be, of course, Australia, Japan, Indonesia as assets of the United States, and how we'd leverage them to then deploy resources and troops to fight that war. And then for Europe, you would be, basically organizing all across the NATO to do exactly the same thing. But we don't have those formal alliances for defensive fighting going on in those other areas. So that's my theory, is a lot of this U.S. troop movements to these areas are in order to develop and basically smooth out the path lines. And you could see that in Taiwan right now. There's a huge Wall Street Journal article came out this week.
David, you're going a mile a minute here. I'm just trying to catch up with you.
Oh, sorry.
Are you talking about World War III?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I thought that was clear. Sorry.
Okay. I mean, this was like the world's fastest game of Risk. I was just like, I could see the Matrix. I was like, holy shit, what's going on? That's okay.
Yeah. So imagine if you're saying we're going to do it's going to be a three front war between the United States and its resources, basically the West, NATO, and Russia, China, Iran. Mm-hmm. If that's what the fight is over Taiwan, Ukraine, and then the defense of Israel, and possibly to regime change Iran, which I think it was funny. There's so much on that. We had there. What was it? Alan Dershowitz last summer was just going around talking to people about, hey, did you know this? The Shah has a son, and we could put him in power there, and you never know. They may even like it. They even made the same Iraqi. They're like, we don't know if Iraqis would like that. He did it in a debate against Glenn Greenwald this summer.
Interesting.
About whether or not to bomb Iran if they had nukes. So obviously,
there's a son that people might like.
That to me is interesting, especially with all of the. Yeah, right. We did it before. Worked in the 1960s for about a decade. So yeah, that's how I'm seeing it. Like this is the deployment of troops themselves aren't for active combat roles probably, but it's to smooth out logistical challenges that you're going to have in order to deploy so that you can quickly turn on a three-front war.
Yeah.
I have to imagine there's like back rooms where all the neocons are just like hanging out together and they're just like, yo, what if we did this? And they're just like theory crafting ideas and they're just like, yeah, dude, there's a son. We could totally put him in place.
Let's find him.
It's like,
He'd be mad if he's like a totally chill dude. We gotta like put him in.
Dude, he could totally be our puppet for the next democracy.
Dude, yeah. Think of how many torture chambers we could have.
I'm so fucking scared right now. You shut up.
Why are they NeoBros?
The NeoBros.
That's how I feel like it is oftentimes. Like I feel like they're just like throwing ideas at the wall and they're like, yeah, dude, that's awesome. That's a great idea. Right? Like, that's how it feels to me oftentimes, where it's just like, I don't know if it'll work, but let's give it a shot, man.
It's sort of sounds like a skit idea.
It feels so real to me.
We could get that to Ryan Long. Like Ryan Long would do that justice.
Well, it's like a Obama saying the greatest regret of his presidency was, yeah, we just didn't have a plan for after Libya. You're just like, you didn't have a plan? You just kind of wing it? You're just like, dude, let's just instill a riot and have the people of Libya sodomize their leader with curvy swords. And let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens.
You know, you got to be an active participant in the World Cup. You can't be passive, otherwise Hitler happens, right? That's the only thing we know.
It's like having an ant farm. I think that's the way he's looking at it. He's like poking the glass of the ant farm. Like, what would happen if I did a thing in here?
Not only that description, that crazy description that I just gave, that happened on live TV too. Like, I watched that happen when I was in high school.
I remember.
Right?
I remember. Fucking idiot middle schoolers took that as getting Gaddafi like joke.
Yeah,
thing
no,
that they
we used to say getting Gaddafi. We used to say that.
Yeah,
like in high school.
Yeah.
But it was exactly that. Is Obama just being like, yeah, that was our biggest regret is we didn't have a plan for what happened after. You're like, there was no plan.
Hey, you know what?
That's why I feel like the NeoBros thing is kind of a real thing.
I'm pretty glad. Like, it makes me feel better about Trump's answer during the debate about like not really having a plan. Like, at least he told us. At least he put it out
Well,
there.
he's just like, yeah, we'll get to that when I'm president, obviously, but right now I'm not president yet. And it's like, but that's kind of actually how it works. You know, it's just.
Wow, this has really turned into like a rare, uncensored, skiff episode here towards the end. You guys are getting a rare look behind the curtain at the stuff we normally don't say in public.
Well, you know, I don't know. I think we do
the Gaddafi stuff mostly.
Yeah, but I do think we owe our listeners and just the world this is how things are organizing. You see these chess pieces go out, these risk pieces go out, and the way they're distributed, and you're like, don't we not want to do this? You're just left with this sense of like inevitability. The way that the press covers what I was talking about this week with Wall Street Journal covering new operations to develop new ways of refueling in Australia right now in preparation for a war with China. Like, the Chinese have a subscription to the Wall Street Journal too, right, guys? Like, what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah.
And that's, I think it should be secret or something. But I'm like, why are we treating this like this is a thing that has to happen? Like, what is the effort to make this not happen? That would be some great reporting, but that's not happening. Or at least not being reported if it is happening.
Well, I mean, not by the mainstream media, but that makes sense because the mainstream media is the corporate press. It's the military industrial press, right? Like, they're operating for the benefit of those entities. Like, right. They want this to happen. So they want us to feel like it's a foregone conclusion and that it has to happen. And, you know, they need to propagandize the public into accepting it.
Right. If it bleeds, it leads sort of thing with the news.
Yep.
Right.
And
a perverse incentive, but also if you're out there the one outfit that's actually breaking, here are all the things we're trying to do to prevent war again for Taiwan, that would be awesome too. I just suspect it's not happening. I would suspect that the Biden administration is just simply uninterested in it because all the incentives point the other direction.
Yeah. Yep.
So anyways, we don't have to get into the Gray Zone article. We'll just move on. Or actually, that means
I can't believe they didn't dive into World War III when it was on The View this week.
Oh, who was on The View?
Biden.
Oh,
no way.
Yeah, I avoid that.
He left the beach.
You don't watch The View?
No.
I saw it on Twitter where he said that Kamala had basically could have done anything that he had the power to do. So.
Oh yeah. Oh, that was from this week. Okay,
yeah,
I saw that clip.
That's being used against him and Kamala right now about people saying she couldn't do these things. She's VP, and it's like, well, he says she could.
And Biden was on The View being like, no, we gave her tons of power on foreign policy.
She was
border czar,
Ukraine, the border.
Just
throw her under the bus and all the bad
anything
stuff.
I couldn't get into, she just took up full throttle.
Biden's walking up to the View studio. He takes off his Trump hat, puts it in his bag.
He's still carrying that hat around from that guy.
Oh, do you guys want to do one more? Just off the cuff, World War III?
Throw it down,
story?
baby.
Okay, so Starmer, you remember Starmer?
Keir Starmer?
Yeah, Keir Starmer. He's the guy who's throwing his own citizens into jail for memes.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's the Prime Minister of the UK. Yep. He went to the Biden White House and had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and we didn't cover it. I kind of missed it.
What happened?
The Biden White House put a press release that basically said, they had a meeting, and we don't know anything about it. Now,
that's the story.
Scott Ritter.
Wow, foreign policy, everybody. That's crazy.
The only
story,
policy.
Dude, these stories are getting crazy.
You got to pull the strings together to really get a sense of it. Scott Ritter covered it, and he's a former UN inspector for like nukes and stuff like that, and a U.S. Marine Corps veteran.
I like that. I like that being his title. He's the inspector of nukes and stuff like that.
Sorry, I can't. I'm just summarizing. Okay, I don't have his title in front of me.
You're doing great. Keep
He's
going.
the deputy director of nukes and stuff like that.
And biochemical weapons, Kyle. Okay, so
stuff like that.
Yeah. I'm just summarizing. His hypothesis is very interesting. His hypothesis was that what they want to do is they want to introduce what's called Storm Shadow missiles, which is a specific missile developed by the
Sauron.
Yeah, it sounds like a D&D spell.
Ironically, the UK, right? So yeah.
Anyway,
that allows for over horizon missile capability. So it's a long range weapon that can be tipped with things that maybe a nuke. Right now they're
just the tip.
Just the tip, only the tip.
I'm in that.
It can be tipped with stuff and things.
Yeah.
Now, who's the deputy director of? Who's the deputy director of determining the tips and stuff?
Theoretically, it would be a national security director. Yeah. Anyways, so we currently have the use of Storm Shadow weapons as well as American cruise missiles for defensive purposes only. They have a longer range capability, but there's a policy that says they can only attack former Ukrainian territory with it. So they can't back up their existing counteroffensive into Russia with these capabilities. They have to do that with other capabilities, right? On the ground, they can't get as much air support as they want. They have to use drones purchased from other places, stuff like that, right? But they can't use American missiles for that. Starmer's effort was probably, according to Ritter and others, was to convince Biden to get new authorization for long-range strikes into Russia. This is backed up by something Mike Ben said this week, which was that the current strategy in Russia was to at first, basically fight them to a standstill and degrade their Russian military capability by killing them as they tried to gain more ground. That hasn't really they've been stalemated for so long with not really any substantial change that doesn't seem like it's actually deterring the Russians at this point. So their current and with U.S. incentive for the war waning because looks like Trump is going to be president potentially, things like that, because the polls are going down in support for the war in Ukraine, they have to change the game in order to get a favorable finding to say that's not a loss. So the current effort is to persuade the president, and Starmer's probably part of this, to enable long-range missile strikes into Russia.
Which is World War III.
Russia said if they do that, it would be an existential threat to their government, and they would use nukes. That is what they've been saying since the very start of the war. That if they've backed up a little bit on that. They didn't drop nukes when Ukraine just did this counteroffensive, right? But that's not an existential threat. What is something that could be nuclear tipped, that flies feet off the ground and can track over the horizon and then land within fractions of a second at speeds that are faster than sound. Those capabilities mean that we would be able to hit them before they could hit us, which means existential nuclear threat they would launch. So Ritter thinks they got together in their little office, got a call from the Russians, said, if you sign this, it's on. We launched the weapons.
UK's really pushing for the war.
Dude, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Did they sign it?
No.
Thank God.
So no change in policy happened after the Starmer interview. And that's what he says. Now it's highly speculative. We don't know this happened, right? We don't know anything, right? Because this is our government, right?
But Scott Ritter, inspector of nukes and stuff, says that
yes,
this is how
exactly. He said that's his hypothesis. That's why Biden is so pissed, right? There's all these videos that came afterwards of his speeches afterwards. He's like really grumpy, and he's like, maybe that's why, because he just got bullied out of doing the policy wanted by the Russians.
I mean, it's just crazy that's a policy that you would want.
Biden.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, he disrupted his beach vacation for this, and then he didn't even get it. He didn't even get it.
He didn't even get approval.
Look, I was just trying to start World War III. Okay, like, is that so much to ask?
He's just trying to be the last president.
I want to leave this world with a bang.
Wow. Yeah, really leave your mark on the earth. On society.
Also, Trump was quoted this week on another interview as saying that the current nuclear weapon capability is 300 times greater than Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
The current total?
No. Like a singular bomb now is 300 times more powerful.
Oh.
So imagine that. Like that means you can take out much, much larger cities with a singular bomb. An explosion, even in the atmosphere itself, with a bomb that size, would be devastating.
Oh yeah, I can
even if you
imagine
shoot it down or something like that.
the cloud that would envelop.
Yeah, not to mention the EMP, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, that was a
really bright note.
Really bright note.
Yeah.
Well, there's one more. There's one more. Did you guys see the clip I sent of the FBI agent testifying in front of Congress?
Yes.
And
yes.
He basically said, this testimony is my last act as a public servant of the United States, and I basically have no faith that the FBI is going to do anything to change, and I encourage all Americans to buy 4 months worth of food, arm themselves, and pray.
Get lots of water.
And get lots of water. Yeah. So
this is where we're at.
Guys.
Yeah.
It could happen anytime.
I'm telling you the hard truths.
Well,
hard truths.
I guess
You can't handle the truth.
No, I can't. I can't.
I guess as we close out the show, I guess I'll pitch our Skiff episode where we're going to see, are we the woke right?
Wow. That seems so pithy and stupid.
Maybe we should talk about
because there's a bunch of British people saying that there's this new woke right movement. And all these British influencers.
Pretty much because we're talking about foreign policy the way we are, that's why we're the woke right according to these guys. So you guys got to check it out. I think it's totally going to be a worthwhile conversation. For real.
We are the woke right because we are trying to avoid World War III.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you've made it all the way, if you've made it all the way here through our Gaddafi jokes and our nukes and stuff jokes, if you've made it all here, you'll probably enjoy what the Skiff episodes are normally like, where we usually end up, or what we're kind of reorganizing how we're doing the Skiff episodes quite a bit, where we're going to be taking deep dives for about an hour into very broad topics, and the one that we're going to be doing this time is this woke right controversy that's happening and seems to be infesting and is probably creating a right-wing civil war right now. And in future episodes, we're planning interesting talks about angels and demons and aliens and all this other stuff.
Time to get weird.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about 5th generation warfare, and that's something that's
Tom
been.
Hanks in here.
We're gonna then we're gonna steal the Declaration of the United States.
Declaration of the United States.
And become a member of the Discord, because if you're all the way here and you're not a member of the Discord, that seems silly. Link is in the description. For everybody still watching, thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we will see you in the next one.
Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to become a member and support the show financially, check out humanreactionpod.com. And remember,
let's just instill a riot and have the people of Libya sodomize their leader with curvy swords, and let's just see what happens.